I'm speaking with my co-host, Brian Sathianathan, co-founder, chief digital officer, CTO of Iterate.ai, and Dr. John Selvadurai, senior director of R&D at Iterate.ai, for a conversation about the adoption of innovative technologies in traditional organizations. What does it take to bring digital innovation into all these companies? And what are some of the problems leaders are facing, and how can they solve them? We even toy with the idea that perhaps a better predictor of future success is not being an aggressive adopter of tech, but being more flexible and faster at bringing solutions or functionality to market. Give it a listen and let us know what you think. Hey, Brian. Today, I understand we are talking about the adoption of innovative technologies in traditional organizations. So why is that an important topic?
Hi, Jeff. It's great to be on a call again with you. And this is an amazing topic, I think. This is one of the topics that we at Iterate, and I personally, myself, have spent quite a lot of time thinking through. Because where we are right now, Jeff, we are in this era of the great digital acceleration, right? What I mean by that is that companies, especially traditional organizations, what I mean by traditional organizations are companies whose core business is not technology, but they're selling a product or a service, and they have to use technology as a driver. And every company is in a place right now where they have to accelerate and go to market rapidly than ever before. Another thing that's really interesting is the amount of time these traditional organizations, especially if they are public, being in the S&P 500 has actually significantly shortened. It has gone from being 20 plus years in the olden days to under 3 to 5 years these days. So it's a very competitive market. And the accelerant and the driver is digital, right? So that's why today's topic is so super important, because digital is the lifeblood that's going to be running a lot of, basically determining the future of these organizations. And today, we're going to talk about this type of solutions and what does it take to bring innovation and through digital innovation into all these companies, and what are some of the problems leaders are facing, and how can they practically solve some of those things. And I'm also, Jeff, super excited today to have John Selvadurai in our session today here with us. In fact, Dr. John Selvadurai. John has a PhD in management sciences as well as technology. He has master's degrees in computer science. He is the senior director of research and development at Iterate.ai. He leads several of our customer projects, several projects that significantly accelerating digital initiatives. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for having me here.
John, we want to ask you today, when you are helping and leading teams and helping and communicating with leaders and helping these leaders think about innovating and building new digital projects, what are some of the challenges and what are some of the challenges these leaders are facing? Can you help the audience understand, and can you help us unpack what are some of the key critical challenges these leaders and these organizations are facing?
Yeah, from our experience, from the enterprise experience that we have, I have seen 3 major challenges the companies have. So one is this. Most of the technology stack is built in the very traditional classic stack system, which was actually 30 years old. So if you're looking at a company that is 30 years old, then most of the technologies were built in the late 90s or mid 90s. For an example, during that time, there is no concept of social media or a smartphone, right? So that's just, a couple of quick examples. So when the technologies were built there, they did not really pay attention or didn't really have the flexibility to integrate all of them in the latest era. And as the years go, there are more features, more additional pieces are built on top of those technologies. So it's very hard to unpack them and change something completely different. So that is the major challenge the organizations have in common, because they cannot quickly change something because that was a very old system. Then the second part is related to that is the flexibility. because any latest technologies that are very easy to plug and play, that flexibility is there. But if you're looking at a very technology that was 20, 30 years old, in order to make a change, that takes a lot more time than what it takes for a latest technology to make the change. So the third item I wanted to bring it in is the maintenance part of it, because when you look at a classic technology stack, that requires a lot more people than a latest technology requires. A latest technology, a product that was built in completely new technologies require maybe 2 people. A similar functionality that was built in an old one, 20 years old technology, might require 5 people. So that tells if the scalability part, where if you want to make those any small changes on that the older technology, you need 5 more people to do the changes. So these are the main challenges that I listed, or I can think of. They are the challenges for new adoption, because if you are bringing a new innovation technology to implement in the large organization, they have to first deal with their current technology stack that is 20, 30 years old, and they have to make sure that it's flexible enough to work with their existing ones. And the third one is they need a lot more people to maintain them.
That is super interesting, John. So that means, based on what you're saying, is the differentiation, the difference or the cost deltas between a traditional technology stack, just in terms of people, not the total, not the licensing cost, but just in people alone, just maintenance wise, you need more people, and almost twice or even more, right? 2.5 times more people than a modern stack, a technology stack. Can you also comment from getting to market development? Is that also the same thing? Whereas you need less number of people to roll these solutions out, not only just maintaining them, but to roll them out as well. Is that true as well?
Yeah, it is true too, because in one of the challenges that the large organizations experience is the resources who has the knowledge in those technologies, in those era, are very less. Because more, as the time goes, everyone in this field wanted to learn the new technology, and then they want to work in the new technology. No one wants to go back and work in an old technology. So if there is, so all these organizations running old technology stack, but the workforce is not ready or not available to add anything new or maintain them or develop on anything. There is a lack of workforce problem there. And in order to hire the new resources and do the work, new resources are not going to work on the old technology. They expect the new technology. And if you want to put the new technology, that doesn't work with the old technology. So it is a dilemma that all these larger organizations are facing right now.
This is super fascinating, John. So that means essentially there are 3 categories of resources, like phases of resources that organizations are going through. So one is resources who are trained on older technology who are still there. Mm-hmm. Resources who are versed with newer technologies and who are getting themselves updated with these newer technologies. And then there is this lack of resources or lack of skill set for the newest technologies. What I mean by that is AI, ML, and the inability for traditional companies to hire and retain resources for these, what I call the bleeding technologies. So it seems like there are 3 levels of problems.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there are, I think I can touch some of the solutions. Some of them are trying to. So where this is currently going is, instead of trying to change the existing enterprise system or the tech stack, the alternative solution that in the industry that we are seeing is they are trying to bring another system in parallel, but they're not implementing that new system entirely to replace the old system. Old system still works, but the new system will handle all the innovation technologies, and it communicates with the old system only on those needs to keep the data correct or keep the item syncs. So in that way, you are not spending a lot of time and resources to replace the old system. The old system runs because things are working for 20, 30 years. They're not going to change it. It will run as it is. But at the same time, to handle the new technology, new innovation needs, there's a new system comes in to play, and that handles all the new needs. And just to keep everything, the records, data, everything to be synced, it only talks in only several points with the old system. So you are making only few connections to the old system to pass the data there, but it satisfies the need for the new requirements as well as the old requirements.
Brian, when I hear that, two things immediately pop to mind. Is one, I've got the forecaster's dilemma in retail, in that I've got to fundamentally transform this industry, which I believe is happening. It's already happened. All you got to do is look at Amazon, Walmart, Target, 3, 4, 5 of the big, Ulta for sure. The transformation's happening, but how do I transform an industry without doubling or tripling IT spend? And I think we're talking about that's happening, but it's happening with cloud. It's happening with low code, with some of these other technologies that are allowing a decrease in maintenance. Maintenance is a massive cost for IT. It's a massive cost. I mean, when Dr. John just says it's half the cost in maintenance, immediately I kick into my old forecasting mode and say, man, that's about 20% of an IT budget. That could be as high, or a software budget. So if I can cut that in half, if I can somehow add flexibility by taking costs out of the equation, I can transform my industry without necessarily doubling or tripling IT spend, which is not going to happen. So I think this is really an interesting way of going. And I think the second point that probably came across pretty well is that it's doable now to do that without necessarily having to say a retail that maybe is a conservative adopter can say, I can't spend the money I need to spend to be fundamentally transformative. And in this new environment, we actually can be transformative without necessarily having to double or triple, again, IT spend.
Definitely, Jeff. And one area that how we call them is a shadow, right? We call them a shadow tech stack or a shadow cloud or a shadow POS. So anything that is happening in a traditional way, we bring a new system there and call them as a shadow, but it completely works in a very new way in parallel to that, and then syncs everything there. So to implement that, it's like you said, 20% of the IT budget, right, to need to handle that one. And then very human resources are needed for that because everything is SaaS-based and cloud-based. So you don't need a huge IT workforce to handle and maintain them.
Brian, this is a question to both you and Dr. John. We used to talk about 4 types of tech organizations: aggressive adopters of technology, let's say fast followers, mainline, and conservative. I mean, the fast adopters were clear. It would be, in the old days, it'd be Walmart, it'd be Target. In this new model, I wonder if there needs to be a different thinking and not necessarily just go with the old adoption patterns, but who's more flexible, who can move faster, who's got an older tech stack versus a more modern tech stack. And just thinking as we're talking through, does there need to be a new classification as to how an IT organization functions or thinks?
I think IT organizations, in traditional organizations have to begin to think a little bit like the Silicon Valley companies a little bit, because digital being the great accelerant. It's about how quickly can I get products to market? How quickly can I go to market with my solutions for the customers? Because now the customers are demanding, because a lot of the experience, Jeff, if you look at it, you go online, you shop, and you expect the website to be very smart and provide you recommendation, right? You expect the customer, the website to know your order. You walk into a store, you expect them to know you, because that's what you learned from Amazon as a customer. So a lot of things have become table stake, right? So in a world like that, every traditional organization has to release and bring digital much faster. So I think I would create a brand new category, or like a different spin to that, which is basically, can you go the players who go to market fast and who cannot go to market fast and who never do anything in the digital, right? So like either you play in digital, you don't play in digital. If you play in digital, are you a fast go-to-marketer or you're a slow go-to-market? Are you rolling out annual IT projects and then your IT, and then every year you could do 6 projects and that's it? Or are you rolling out solutions fast to your consumers? Are you one of those players? Because it's not just about the adoption of technology, right? Because technology can be adopted within an organization for a number of reasons, right? One adoption could be for internal use, for the business teams, for finance teams, and that's more of an efficiency play. We are not necessarily talking about that. Then there is the adoption of infrastructure. Are you putting the next generation infrastructure? We are talking about that. But I think the one that we are more focused on is how many things can you bring to your consumer? Because this whole consumer-facing applications, this consumer-facing solutions, and go-to-market with consumers through digital, I think it's a big deal. And I think in that space or that industry where we can basically break players into three. One is the organizations that have fast go-to-market, that have slow go-to-market, and then that have no go-to-market strategy at all.
So as a analyst, there is zero chance I will create a survey where I'll ask retailers, are you fast to market? Are you slow or not? Not going to happen. But what is interesting is maybe there's a checklist that needs to happen. How fast can you bring a solution or a functionality to market or something like that? You really probably couldn't survey that, but you can certainly do that as a self-diagnostic. And maybe that's something we need to start talking about. In the quiet of your boardroom, how fast is it to bring a functionality to market? And even just using that terminology to market. I don't know that I've really typically heard us in the retail industry talk about that. We talk about bringing functionality online, but not bring it to market. That might be time for sort of a shift in how we think.
Absolutely, Jeff. I fully agree. Because if you look at the predictions of, that Microsoft came up with, there's going to be 500 million apps, right? By 2030 or 2028, right? And then the predictions and the categorization, if you look at the blog from Scott Brinker, right? The types of apps that are gonna come out. If you look at some of the concepts that Scott Brinker is talking about, he's talking about cloud apps, service apps, platforms that provide you apps, specialist apps, and custom apps. And according to him, there's going to be lots and lots of custom apps, which is basically internal enterprise business use apps. But in addition to that, I also think because digital being a great accelerant, you're going to have lots and lots of consumer front-facing apps these traditional companies are going to be putting up. And they're all going to be connected within these organizations. Because at the end of the day, these solutions cannot live by themselves in a vacuum. They have to have connectivity within the enterprise and its capability, right? So that's why this is going to become super interesting because one, digital is a great accelerant. Companies have to go to market a lot faster. And then the avenues to service consumers in the front end is a big opportunity.
The other point that really resonated me with what Dr. John was saying is the idea of having old skills or not being able to have new skills. Yeah. And immediately thought back to, you guys are too young for this, but those of us old enough remember Y2K and how highly valuable those few programmers that were left to help clean up the code. And I was at Gartner in the consulting practice then, and it was unbelievable, the rates, because nobody knew how to program in COBOL anymore. So those three old guys that were left were billing out at some crazy rates. So I wonder if that's something that board members need to start paying attention to is what are the skills in our IT shop, and are we going to be able to, in 5 or 6 or 7 years, be able to go out and bring in new talent, or are we locked into some of these old systems that we're not going to be able to evolve from? I don't know how to quantify that, but that's really a kind of an interesting and a bit of a scary thought. Those of us that remember Y2K.
Absolutely, Jeff. It's a little bit like this. Yesterday's talent, can you retain yesterday's talent? Can you update yourself as an organization to have today's talent? And can you also hire proactively for tomorrow's talent? All three of those things are something that every IT department, every innovation team has to staff and keep doing it. And John, just want to hear your thoughts about what are companies doing in terms of retaining the right talent, and how are they putting together these innovation teams or these teams that are rolling out products? Mm-hmm. What have you seen? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that is that could go as like a whole separate session as well, because there are a lot to discuss too. But I'll try to bring a couple of things what they are doing, because when it comes to the new talents to retain, the new talents, especially the new graduates or the early, industry experts, they all like to work in the latest and greatest technology. And also they want to work in a brand or in a name brand that makes them feel proud about it. So when that comes to speak in volumes, is the large old organizations have a little bit of trouble to position themselves as in two ways. One is they have the latest and greatest technologies running in, and there are many old organizations still running COBOL in underneath. So they have to show them as they are working in the latest and greatest, especially AI and machine learning areas. Then the second part is that they also have to have a name brand sake that's saying very attractive to the younger audience or younger technical talents to associate themselves. And if you look at in Silicon Valley especially, everyone who walk in, like, they have their own T-shirts with that logo of the company's name, and they're very proud about that. If you look at certain retail organizations, that's a challenge that like how they can put them like their logo in a technology resource shirt and then be proud about it. So this is a little bit of a challenging part. And they are trying to overcome with this.
But by the way, John, Jeff still wears retail logo T-shirts. He has tons of them. He'll tell you about it. But that's different because he's an analyst.
I wear any shirt that somebody's giving me for free. I had 2 kids. I just got done paying for college. You'll find that out, Brian. That ain't the cheapest exercise you're going to do, especially with where your daughter's going to end up going.
Yeah. So the one way some of the organizations are handling these challenges is they are building their innovation arm or their lab, which is like a cool kids camping, right? So they set this up in a separate place than their standard headquarters, away from their standard headquarters. So then in that way, it always function as a new technology, a tech startup type of a company, even though it is part of the large organization, and then they function within themselves with some level of autonomy in their area.
That's really interesting talking about out here, because we're all Silicon Valley folks. So I know that exactly what you're talking about. I wonder how many retailers, how many tech experts inside a retail organization would wear their shirt the way the startups do out here. That's a really interesting. One of the problems we've always had in this industry is recruiting talent. And
maybe that's a survey question when you survey a retail leader. Say, would your young engineers wear your logos with their T-shirts with your logos, right?
Yeah, interesting. A very interesting question. Good stuff. That's great stuff. That's great thinking. Maybe that's some value we can provide, given that we're retailers or we're serving the retail industry, but we are living in Silicon Valley. Maybe we can fan some of that energy out into the industry and say, it's time to take pride in what we're trying to accomplish. And if not, maybe that's a big warning sign also. Interesting. Absolutely, Jeff. That's one of the reasons that as we are working with different customers, we're trying to bring that energy in, right, into the equation. The other thing, I think, John, you touched a little bit on it, and I sort of heard you talk about it, is that about when you talked about legacy systems and massive systems, you were talking about referring to POS, and I'm sure e-commerce platforms are the same thing too. A lot of retailers, or even like non-retail traditional brands, are stuck with these things, right? These massive POS systems, massive ERP legacy systems, lots and lots of old data systems. What are they trying to do? Of course, these whole shadow or parallel running kind of examples are like you bought out. They are one of the ways. But what are some of the approaches that leaders in these companies can take to liberate the rest of their team to innovate fast by liberating them from these types of environments, which is a lot of legacy, highly self-contained, don't have any integrations, do not talk to any of those other systems. Like you said, built several years ago, and some of the vendors are no longer there, just maintaining. So what are your thoughts? If you can help our listeners understand this, and then we have a lot of listeners who are leaders in the space, what advice would you give them?
Yeah. So it's very challenging because when if they don't do this shadow or parallel systems, then the only way they have is to replace the existing one, which is very expensive and also very time consuming. And there's a practical challenge as well, which is when we look at these all legacy systems, even though they were 20, 30 years running them, but one thing we also have to pay attention to is during that 20, 30 years, they built so much of custom features just for their organization. So now if they're going to replace completely, then whatever the new solution there's a base part of it, and they have to cover all that features that was built for the last 20, 30 years and built on top of it, will take years. Even if practically, like adding so many people to do that one, it will take years, right? So that is a practical challenge that very hard to, overcome, depending on like how deeper, how critically these systems that they are trying to replace is in their business lifeline, right? Especially POS, which is lifeline for any retail business, because the money is coming through the POS. And if they have done so many integrations with the POS, their accounting systems, finance systems, security systems, and then they've built so many features based on that POS on all other systems. Now, then when you are bringing a new system, you have to make sure that the new system works with all those customizations and features that are happening on the other systems as well. So it is a massive effort. So the way they can handle is when they bring a new or parallel system, one thing they can do is just like a strangler model, right? So you bring a new system, and then you use that new system for all these latest innovation technologies and everything, and it just speaks to the old system. But then every time when you have a new custom feature to be added, you don't add that into the old system, you add that into the new system, right? So over the years, the new system will grow into handle all the latest and greatest business needs, while the old system may, some of the features that they, built may not be even needed after later. So the legacy could die on its own, and then the new one will start thriving and start expanding. That's one of the ways to handle this. But all these items require a strategic leadership from a very high level, board level, to handle them.
So the other question, I think, John, is as these companies, like we are not even talking about, you pointed out something really interesting, is that these companies are changing, replacing older systems with newer systems, and newer systems take several years to become in par with older systems. This is technologies that are catching up with cloud and connectivity and real-time communication and all that stuff. But we are not even talking about the 5 forces of innovation, which is even like one level in front of this. AI, machine learning, blockchain, technologies from startups. How does all these things merge together? Are we living in a world that they will never ever catch up? This is a big problem in this great era of digital acceleration. What do you see? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, there are platforms available now, including Interplay. Hope self-promotion could be fine here. The platform like Interplay, or there are several other platforms also available. The way that it handles them is all the technologies or all the other systems that needs to be implemented or integrated already being connected or having connectors into them. So in that way, when they are connecting to the old systems, it's much faster, much easier. You don't have to wait until build a feature that actually does that part, because it reduces the development time to a very, very minimum. So it can communicate very quickly, and the development time is very less. So that could work one way. The other way to think about this is all these technologies require a high level of resources or expertise to build them or develop them. Now, if you platform that componentize all these new technologies into a drag and drop or a low-code methodology, then you don't need a very deep, expertised resource to build that one. You could have a junior level resource to build that. So that is also another way to handle this type of enterprise integrations.
Perfect. So there are some ways. So that means there is a way, there is hope, there is a methodology, or a couple of methodologies where companies can catch up faster. Not only can they catch up faster, but that can also leapfrog into the modern technologies by taking a couple of approaches, including low code or even connectivity and all these 5 forces. The other thing that's also interesting, John, is that I've seen cases where companies do a complete 180-degree turn and go and implement microservices and then highly scalable server-side compute or server functions and all the serverless functions and all kinds of things. And they are not originally equipped to do something like that. And then they get stuck in the middle. Now they can't. So every project goes like doubles budget and takes more time. So how do leaders avoid dilemma like that? Because because it's a fine line, right? You don't want to fall one way. You don't want to fall to the left. Neither do you want to fall to the right.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, that challenge is real because we have seen in the past that some organizations took the approach that when you have the legacy system that is running, also investing in a cloud-based system and having the internal IT to build the cloud-based system in parallel to the traditional systems and keep them running and keep building the cloud system feature by feature or day by day to make moving everything to the cloud. So I think 2 years ago, maybe now still, that's a cool thing, moving everything to the cloud. So they're trying that one. The trap they sometimes run into is that at one point, they are spending a lot for running two systems, one in the cloud and one in the old stack, and both are doing the same work, and then they are unable to speed up one or the other to reduce the cost, right? So that is a trap that we have seen. They are going through that. The solution is that what we have seen is it's trying to solve many problems as much as through software, rather than adding more resources, body counts to the project to make things go faster, but rather invest at the early stage to solve the problems through software. And some of the features like that might be required through more people to build. But if it can be architected and if it can be planned or strategized properly in the mindset of reducing the cost and using the software to do the heavy lifting, then that can be done. Even though at the early stages you may have to spend a little bit more, but in a long term it may not be, right? It will yield some profit or revenue back.
Interesting. That might be the place to cap this conversation, I think, Brian. I'm fascinated by the concept of flexibility. I'm fascinated by the concept of getting costs out of the equation, but driving innovation in. And that's something we're going to have to figure out how to study, I think, maybe more going forward.
Absolutely, Jeff. I fully agree, because this is something that can help our leaders and our listeners. And as we always like to talk about what you do on Monday, right? This is one of those what you do on Monday and what you do for the next 1 year problem, because the more we can help them think through this, the more equipped and more capable they become. And the more cases, examples, data we can bring here, I think will be super valuable.
I almost think in this scenario, the first thing on Monday is to think through what kind of organization do you want out 5 years? And then the Monday action or the Tuesday action is how do I get there from here, as opposed to where do you start? Because this might be, if we are at a fundamentally transformative point, and I always get nervous when I hear that because I'm the analyst that doesn't want to create buzz just to make noise. But it's hard to argue that we're not at a point where everything has changed. You have to be in the BOPUS business. You have to be online. You have to be digital first. You have to be doing all this stuff. And so, I don't know, pick whatever time you want. I'm fine saying today is the day where things have to change. And if that's the case, what does the organization need to look like in 2025 or 2026? And then what do you need to do now to get to where you want to be?
Absolutely, Jeff. I fully agree. I think these are very valid questions, and also the right questions for leaders to ask and to think about it. I think we should help them through creating more content in this space.
I think these will be subjects that we'll be circling around again and again. So as always, Brian, interesting, fascinating. Dr. John, thanks for joining us, and hopefully we'll be able to tap into you on an ongoing basis going forward.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff.
See you guys. Thanks for tuning into today's episode. For more info, refer to the pod notes below. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and review. It really helps us grow. I'm your host, Jeff Roster, analyst at large. If you want to connect, follow us on Twitter at JeffPR or at Brian Sathianathan, or connect with us on LinkedIn. Visit my website at roster.retail.com or Brian's at Iterate.ai. Until next time, stay safe and have a great week.